Good afternoon, everybody. It's a delight to see you all here today and to welcome you to the Royal Society of Edinburgh's Young People's Signature event, Scotland's Leaders Making Sense of Politics. My name is Stephen Breslin. I'm a Fellow of the Royal Society of Edinburgh and the Young Persons Programme Convener. And I'm delighted to be asked to attend and open up proceedings today. It's also a bit of a relief to see everybody here. Apparently, all trains were cancelled north from Scotland today, and I only became aware of this when I bumped into one of our co-chairs completely by chance in a motorway service station a couple of hours ago. So it really is a relief to see everybody here and so many young people from the local schools. Now, before we get going, just some very, very simple housekeeping. There are no fire alarms planned, but if one does go off, it is for real, and the emergency exit is just over there. So nice and easy, and we would all exit from that door. And if I could ask you all to check that your phones are on silent, that would be great. Thank you. So many of you will know, but maybe perhaps some of you don't, but the Royal Society of Edinburgh is Scotland's national academy. Founded in 1783, so quite a while ago. And it's a collection of around 1,800 fellows from across the sciences, arts, humanities, social sciences, business, and public service. Our mission is the advancement of learning and useful knowledge for public good. Now, one of the principal mechanisms to advance that mission is our public engagement programme. And today is an example of that. And the Young Persons Signature event is usually one of the highlights of that public engagement programme. In fact, I would go to say it is the highlight of our annual public engagement programme. And it's always a very special event designed to educate and encourage new ways of thinking, ideas, and conversations. And I think today, more so than ever, where we're going to be able to take part in a debate that was co-created by our guests from the members of the Youth Scottish Parliament, or Scottish Youth Parliament, and we're joined by a cross-spectrum of our MSPs from across Scotland's political spectrum. We hope that today will give us all a deeper insight into the political process. And I think that's particularly relevant for the young people that join us today, who'll have the opportunity to vote for the very first time in the elections, the Scottish elections of next May. So I'd like to acknowledge our partners. We wouldn't have been able to host this event without them. So thank you to the Scottish Youth Parliament, Young Scot, the Holyrood Trust, YouthWorks, Dumfries and Galloway, and South of Scotland Enterprise. And now I'm going to hand you over to our chairs for the event today. And I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Alicia Greathead, who is a Fellow of the Royal Society of Edinburgh and Chief Executive of the Campaign for Science and Engineering. And Alicia is joined by Michael Dodds, who is representing South of Scotland Enterprise today from the Youth Forum of SOSI. And in his daytime job, a production manager with Jazz Wilson. So with that, can I hand you over to our chairs, and I hope you all have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephen. As Stephen just said, my name is Alicia and this is Michael. Michael has just told me that some of his teachers are in the audience from when he was younger. So this really is like a small community, isn't it, in Dumfries and Galway. So just to add to what we've just heard from Stephen, a massive thank you to everyone for coming today, especially our politicians who you're going to hear from in a minute. Also, a really big thank you to all the schools that have come here, and I've got lots of people to thank, basically everyone in attendance. We had a really interesting chat over lunch, and I think it's going to be a super interesting session. And we keep talking about young people, and all of you are like, oh God. And I've just realised how much of my life is spent with really, really old people, and how inspiring it is to have you guys in the room. So thank you very much for coming. So my day job, as you can hear, I'm Scottish. I live in Edinburgh, but I work in London, so I travel to London every week. And my job, the organisation that I work for, we are there to influence politicians, basically, and try and get them to be really interested in research and innovation, because we think that's really important. It's about getting new ideas into society and the economy. So we spend a lot of time trying to influence politicians. And I just had a chat with some of you as I came in, and I don't know if I'm right, but I think most of you are studying modern studies. Is that correct? I see some nods. So I think all of you in the audience here, all of us, will realise that politicians are absolutely fundamental to the decisions that are made around us, fundamental to what happens in the UK, in Scotland, what happens in our communities, but also what happens to our own lives and the lives of our families. So the people that make those decisions are super, super important. But what's even more important is you guys, us, the people that vote. And I think all of you, are you all going to be eligible to vote, I think, in the next election? So that vote is super, super important. That is how you can make the decision and drive what is going to happen in your country and the decisions that are made that affect everybody. So as part of that, I'd like you to think this afternoon about those issues that are really important to you and the sort of questions you would like to ask politicians. And you will very, very rarely get an opportunity like this. As I said, I work with politics and policy every day. And getting a group of politicians like this in one room, because they're super busy, trying to get them in one room like this is an absolute nightmare. So yeah, this is a really exciting opportunity. So please use this, because there won't be many times in your life where you get a group of politicians in one place like this and an open forum to ask questions. So make use of it. It's a rare opportunity, and enjoy your afternoon. So we're going to start off. We're going to have a discussion in a little while with all the politicians, where Michael and myself are going to help get some questions answered. But what we're going to do before that is we're going to have some presentations. So I'm going to invite, and I'm not going to introduce them because they're going to introduce themselves, but I'm going to invite Louise and Skye up to the podium to give a presentation. Please give them a round of applause.
So, good morning everyone. I'm Louise Church. I am your MSYP for Galway and West Dumfries. So I represent young people all the way from Stranraer to Dumfries.
And I'm Skye Allen. I'm your MSYP for Dumfriesshire.
So we should have a presentation. I'm wondering if it's up. Our presentation? Yeah. Yes, there we go. So you are probably all wondering what the Scottish Youth Parliament is. So the Scottish Youth Parliament is a democratically elected group of young people. We represent absolutely everybody aged 12 to 25, and we are a youth-led organisation.
So earlier this year, we've came out with our manifesto. A manifesto is a bunch of policies which is fed into by our consultations with young people. And it's all of the issues that young people feel most strong about. So we've managed to collect these into 5 broad themes, and these policies are going to be the foundation of all of our work up until the year 2031.
So the first one we have is education. This is a big range. It goes all the way from your curriculum to financial help in education, to additional support needs, your free school meals, and barriers for accessing higher and further education.
Our second theme is based on communities, so this has policies such as youth-specific spaces, investment in social housing, and early intervention for mental health. So this is mainly focused on making sure that your communities are set up and supportive for you.
The next one we have is a sustainable society. So this is about your climate change, making sure that action is being taken. General economics, nature reserves, and also your public transport, making sure you keep them free bus passes and make sure that it's accessible to absolutely everybody.
Our next theme is a just and fairer Scotland. So this covers policies such as closing the gender pay gap and addressing prejudice, discrimination and bullying. This is making sure that everybody feels safe and respected in their communities.
And last but not least, we have claim your rights. So this makes sure that every young person knows their rights and what they can do with their rights, making sure that they get their reviews inspected and are heard, making sure you're aware they can vote at 16 in Scotland, just general human rights that are really, really important to every person. So thank you so much. This is our SYP manifesto. There's 31 policies in it. And if you want, feel free to ask any questions later on if you see us kicking about. And thank you for listening.
Thank you, Louise and Skye. I'd like to invite Riley up to do his presentation on the Youth Council.
Good afternoon. My name is Riley True. I am the Ward Youth Councillor for Loch Ward, but on top of that, I am also the Vice Chair of Dumfries and Galloway Youth Council. So Dumfries and Galloway Youth Council is an elected body of 35 young people. We are elected every 2 years, with the elections beginning as of tomorrow till December. We are made up of our MSYPs, there are 4 of them, and then we also have ward youth councillors who represent young people who live, work and study in the local ward, and we also have a group of, I believe it's 7 nominated youth councillors who represent groups such as LGBT young people and young carers. So I'm here today to talk to you about a consultation that was run a few times called 10,000 Voices. What is 10,000 Voices? Probably where I should start. So, there we go. 10,000 Voices was originally ran back in 2018 as part of the Year of Young People. This was one of the largest pieces of consultation ever conducted in the region, reaching over 10,000 young people. And it collated all those views together to allow decision makers across the region and further to directly see what issues are impacting young people in this day and age. This was then rerun again back in 2022, 2023, and this data was then collated together and was able to be used to compare back to 2018. And it covers absolutely everything from why young people, what issues they're facing, what they would like more information about, as well as more in depth in terms of demographics and all that sort of lovely statistical information. So, what's the point of a survey if there's no results? So, the consultation itself, which is I think about 20 pages, findings, is split into different ward areas, but we also did it whereas you can see the whole entire region. So out of that, there were 5 key issues affecting young people: smoking and vaping, diet and body image, mental health, bullying, and money and budgeting / cost of living. What we found in this consultation was, while there were slight differences across every ward, these 5 issues were the exact same top issues across every single ward. The issues are also very similar in terms of what young people are wanting to find out more information about. The final slide we've got on this covers a bit more about demographics and all that. So as part of the consultation, it was asked whether young people were intending to stay in Dumfries and Galloway in the future. 55% of no, 45% of people said yes. For those that said that they weren't intending to stay in Dumfries and Galloway, we asked them furthermore why. A lot of people it was for travel, but study and work is also very big components of such. So yeah, that's 10,000 Voices. If you've got any questions about Youth Council or 10,000 Voices, you can happily grab me at the end. And yeah, thank you very much.
So a massive thank you to Louise, Sky and Riley. It's super impressive to see the confidence that you're presenting with, so really well done, thank you. And clarity as well. So we now are going to introduce you to our politicians. So what I'm going to do, I'm hoping I can remember everyone's names as we go through this. So we're going to start from Pam at this end. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to say their names and which party they represent, and then we're going to get to the questions, and then they're going to talk. So if you can just wave when I say your name. So we've got Pam Duncan-Glancy from Labour. We have Ross Greer from the Green Party. We have Corey Wilson from Alba. And then there's Ian Michael, who are politicians. And then we have Emma Harper from SNP. We have Alex Cole-Hamilton from the Liberal Democrats. And Craig Hoy from Conservative. So that is amazing to get coverage from all those different parts of the political spectrum. So thank you again for joining us. Now, what we're going to do now is we're going to have a panel discussion, and we're going to start with 3 questions that have not come from us. They've come from young people in the audience. So we're going to firstly have a question from Ryan. Ryan, if you want to come up. And as Ryan comes up, I just want to explain, we'll discuss each question for about 15 minutes. Everyone's going, oh, it's Ryan. So Ryan, do you want to kick us off with the first question?
Thank you, Chair. My first question to everyone is, young people are regularly consulted on their views, but we are yet to see tangible outcomes or changes as a result of listening to young people. Part B of this is, what's going wrong with the process addressing the concerns of young people?
Well done, Ryan. Thank you. That was very clear. Thank you. So what we're going to do, we might not get everyone being able to answer all the questions, but we're going to spend about 15 minutes on this. So who would like to kick off and respond initially to Ryan's question? Alex.
Thanks, Alicia. Yeah, I wanted to jump right into this one. Before politics, I was a youth worker. I'm the leader of the Lib Dems now, but I was a youth worker for 19 years. I was always involved in the other side of this question, in the attempts to consult and garner the views of children and young people. It's one of the reasons I got involved in politics, because I got so frustrated of young people in Scotland being asked questions by politicians like us, and yet having the answers that they were given roundly ignored. Because young people are like airplanes. You only ever hear about the ones that crash. Still, in politics today, young people are seen, I think wrongly, as part of the problem rather than being part of the solution. And I'll tell you for why. Because we're still having debates in the Scottish Parliament on things like antisocial behaviour, which don't recognise that young people are far, far more likely to be victims of antisocial behaviour than perpetrators of it. We're still having discussions around things like equal protection. We managed, I think, for once, to put young people at the heart of the consideration of Scottish policy making to end the use of physical punishment by parents on children. We were one of the last countries in the developed world to still allow that. And yet, we still get this fundamentally wrong. For example, we have an age of criminal responsibility that is set at 12. The international minimum is 14. Russia and China have ages of criminal responsibility higher than ours. And I'll finish by saying this. You know, one of the most heart-rending pieces of consultation work our Parliament has ever done was when we heard testimony of a young woman called Lindsay Hanvidge, who had been held overnight in a police cell because she punched a police officer the day that she and her brother were taken into care. Really emotional day for her. And as a result of that, she spent, it was entirely compatible with the law, that night in prison. And despite that, nothing about the policy that we shifted, the Act of Parliament we passed, would have changed her story. That is the level to which we hold young people's consultation, and it is a national scandal.
You don't need to clap for every question, but you can if you want. Right, thank you, Alex. So we've got Ross and then Craig, and then I'm definitely getting some women to speak. Right, Pam after that. Right, go.
Thanks very much. So, like Alex, actually, I used to be a youth worker, and I still do a little bit of youth work to keep me sane outside of politics. But I also used to be a member of the Youth Parliament and involved in my local youth council. So I've seen this from both sides. And to me, I think the most jarring example of how young people are talked about, particularly in Parliament, is that in the couple of years since we introduced free bus travel for young people, so that was something that the Greens secured and brought in the couple of years since we introduced that, I've seen loads of MSPs ask questions of the First Minister about young people who misbehave on the bus and say, will you take away their bus passes? I have never seen an MSP ask the First Minister to take away the over 60s bus pass of creepy old men who bother young women on the bus. But we talk about young people as if they're this other group, and it's okay to punish them like that in the way that it wouldn't be okay to punish any other group in society. And on that point of consultation with young people, there's a massive difference between being consulted and actually being part of the process, being a decision maker in the first place. And we've seen that time and again. But to talk about a positive here, Pam and I have just been on the committee that passed a bill to abolish the SQA and replace it with an exams body that actually works, which will be great. But a big part of that process for me was making lots of changes to that bill so that young people weren't just consulted as a kind of tick box exercise, but that there were actually young people involved in making these decisions. So there will now be a young person on the board of Qualification Scotland, what's going to replace the SQA. There will be a whole committee made up of learners, and we had to amend it to make sure that it was in fact made up of learners, that there weren't going to be loads of adult staff members on that committee as well, to recognise the kind of power dynamics there. And that's about making sure that young people are actually able to be part of making these decisions. And what's really important there is adults need to be prepared to be uncomfortable about that. Young people are not always going to make the same decisions that a group of adults would have made. But if we're serious about young people being involved, rather than just kind of patronising tick box consultation, adults need to be brave enough to just let young people make certain decisions, regardless of what that decision is going to end up being. So hopefully you'll start to, in the next couple of years, see a difference there with Qualification Scotland that replaces the SQA. Because let's be honest, the SQA have been pretty crap. They have no interest in your opinions. They have no interest in your teachers' opinions. That's why we needed to get rid of them and replace them with a different body. And we need to make sure that when we're listening to young people, it's not just the young people who've been carefully selected by adults. I've done loads of events in schools where we go in to talk to young people about changes that you want to see in the curriculum and things like that. But the teachers very carefully pick a handful of young people who are going to say what they want to be said. And then I've been in rooms where the young people have gone off script and they've been interrupted by the head teacher or the deputy head teacher saying, oh no, don't worry, we were going to cover that. I know your complaint is that we've not covered consent in sex education, for example, but don't worry, we were about to do that. And all the young people kind of shut down at that point because they know that they're not really there to be heard. They're there to say what senior management want them to say, which is why, final thing I'll say on this is one policy the Greens have got is we want to replace pupil councils in schools with genuinely independent student associations in high schools. So in a lot of European countries, it's totally normal for high school students to have an independent student union like university and college students have. But here in the UK and in Scotland, usually we have pupil councils that are pretty carefully controlled by school senior management in the council. It's not really up to you what gets decided at them, things like that. So if we're serious about actually giving young people a voice, it can't just be a tick box consultation exercise. We need to give you the power to make decisions, and we need, as adults, to be able to accept whatever decision you've made, even if it's not the one that we would have.
Thank you very much, Ross. I'm limiting everyone to about 2 minutes, though, because that was really good, but it was quite long. I just also want to say 4 guys have just come in, and my understanding is that the minibus from that school broke down, and they had to take the bus on their own. So well done. So we heard from your school that you came. So I know you came in late, but it was because you were being very good citizens, so you get a gold star. Right, we are now going to go. And just one other thing, you mentioned the free bus pass. That is a great example. I think we heard over lunch that the free bus pass came in because of the pressure and advice from, and I got this right, the members of Scottish Youth Parliament. Is that where it came from? So that's a great example. Okay, Craig.
Thank you very much, and welcome everybody. Can I just, this is probably quite rare, but can I agree with a lot of what's been said by both the previous speakers?
Oh
because
my God, well done.
I think the interesting thing is politicians say they're very good at listening and consulting, but actually they listen and consult some people more than others. And partly that's because all political parties look at younger voters and they say they're less likely to vote. So therefore, those who are more likely to vote, they're more likely to listen to. And that's, I think, because we've kind of got it wrong. You're all studying modern studies, but right throughout your education, from primary school through to the end of secondary school, are you taught about politics just more generally in the everyday classroom? And I think you should be, because it's really, really important that everybody turns out to vote. And I knock on a lot of doors, and the sort of often people, somebody young comes to the door and they'll say to me, I'm not interested in politics. And if you can get them talking, they're really interested in issues. They're interested in the environment, or they're interested in mental health. They're interested. Emma and I recently met the young carers of Dumfries and Galloway, and I thought they might want to talk about carers allowances and things. They wanted to talk about bus travel, because they were saying if they finish school and they have to get home because they're looking after their mother or a sibling or a grandparent, and there's not a bus for an hour, they feel really guilty by the time they get home, because the carer may have left and they've left their mum or their grandmother on their own. So young people are really, really passionate about issues, but partly because of the way we conduct politics, too much fighting, too much arguing amongst ourselves, a lot of young people are switched off from politics. And then when it comes up to election time, we'll all have half written our manifestos for next year, but I bet nobody's actually gone out there and thought, how do we put ourselves in the shoes of young people in relation to that? And I think that's maybe a wake-up call for all of us. I think the other thing we've got to recognise, though, and this is, it was great to see the report from Riley there, but the statistic that shocked me most, Riley, was that 55% of young people in Dumfries and Galloway don't see their long-term future being here. They want to move. And I think this is maybe a lesson for all of us as well, is nationally we always talk about, big urban centres, Glasgow and Edinburgh, bus services, 15-minute neighbourhoods. But actually I've got some communities that I represent here in Dumfriesshire who would just like one bus a day. They don't want a bus every half an hour. They just want one bus service a day to connect them to the rest of the country. And often people will say, but how do we get people from rural areas into the cities? Actually, how do we bring those services in cities out to rural areas? And I think if we can do something in relation to listening to the voices of younger people, it would be to try and bring in this area that 55% figure down, so people want to live, stay, work and play here in Dumfries and Galloway.
Brilliant, thank you, Craig. Right, I'm going to go Pam and Corey and then Emma. You've got the final say, so it's going to be a good one. So we're going to go Pam.
Thank you, and thank you all so much for coming in, particularly for showing the commitment to turn up when the bus didn't and go and find another form of transport to get here. So thank you for that. I think the question was specifically on what's gone wrong in the process of engaging young people, and I think, if I'm honest, there's probably two things that I think have gone wrong. The first thing is that we don't have enough young people round the table when decisions are getting made. And that's crucial, because years ago when I worked in the third sector, we were talking, I worked in a disabled people's organisation, and we talked about, nothing about us without us, ensuring disabled people were involved in all different policies. And someone round that table said, if you're not round the table, you're probably on the menu. And at that point I thought, yeah, it's really, really important to be in the room. And so that's why strengthening as much of our services as we can to make sure that young people have a voice at the heart of them is absolutely crucial. So that's the first reason I think it's gone a bit wrong, and that's because young people are not involved in the way that they should be. And not because young people aren't wanting to be, but because adults don't involve them. And Ross spoke a bit about that meaning power has to be ceded, and that's true. It's the same in other parts. When women became more empowered many years ago, and it's still of course a strong fight. Men had to cede power, and it's uncomfortable at times, but it's necessary, and that's why one of the reasons why I think it's gone wrong. I think the other reason that it's gone wrong, and I am going to be a bit political, but I guess we're a panel of politicians here, so hopefully I'm allowed to be. I think young people have been promised quite a lot lately, and they've not had it delivered. And when people make promises to young people, or to anyone in the electorate for that matter, and don't deliver them, that's when people disengage. That's when you get people not even prepared to come and talk to you about what it is that you need and want, because people think, well, what's the point? So I think those two things speak to why things have gone wrong. What would I do differently? Well, I would like to see duties on public bodies building on the UNCRC to make sure that they not just worked with young people and had them within their decision-making structures, including, for example, organisations like Qualifications Scotland. I'd have taken it further into another body, which I'll talk about in a second as well. But they should do that, but also they should be held to account for the impact that has. So it's not good enough just having people sitting round and giving all their ideas and all your time and your energy into what needs to change to make Scotland a better place for your future. We also have to come back and say, okay, this is what has changed as a result of that. And so I think public bodies should be responsible and accountable for that. I also think that we need to look at youth work again. Youth work services have been hugely undervalued for over the best part of 2 decades, in fact, and that's having a big impact on the sorts of things that we can do to support young people to have their voice heard and influence things. Because it's not just as simple as waking up one day and thinking, I want to do this. This is what I want to change, and this is exactly how I'm going to do it. People need to have networks and communities and organisations that support them to do that, young people and others. And so that's why I think building youth work and building up youth work again to what it has been in the past and what it should be in the future would be another key part of it. And I'll finally end on the point that we heard earlier from one of our presenters about curriculum. I also think the curriculum is really important, and there's an opportunity through schools to support young people to have their voices heard through basically giving young people their voice back and helping them to be able to connect locally, but also use it and having the power and the confidence to do that. I think too often we work in a space where people don't have the confidence to speak out, and that is not the sort of Scotland that I want to live in. And so that's why I think we've got a real responsibility through the curriculum and through schools to try and enhance young people's voice as well, so that you can get your guys' agenda on the political agenda.
Thank you, Pam. Corey.
Thank you. I think it's interesting, there's a pattern development here, because I also was a youth worker for 10 years. And that was back in the day, and I used to work on the streets with the most disenfranchised young people, people that didn't even want to go to youth clubs or be involved in anything, and it was really challenging work, but it was really rewarding work. And what I found most interesting was, years later, as an older person, I would come across the young people that I worked with in the supermarket, and at that point, you know, they had their own families, and they would always stop and speak to me, and they would say, do you remember when you said such and such and such and such, or do you remember when we did this? And, you know, from my point of view, I probably thought at the time they weren't listening to me, but it just goes to show you they were listening and they wanted to be heard. And we did lots of different things with them to give them experiences of the world, because that's the other thing that was a big highlight to me. I worked with young people you wouldn't even believe had never been on a train. So it's about the opportunities, and I agree with much of what's been said here today, and I was going to pick up the point about youth workers, because I absolutely think good youth workers give the most disenfranchised young people a voice, and I think that's really important going forward.
Got a great point, very brief as well, and very, very good. Right, last point from Emma.
Thanks very much. I will be brief because I agree with a lot of what's been said already. I just want to be giving a big shout out to Youth Work Dumfries and Galloway, because Laura Kilty and the team, there's a reason why you're winning awards, because you're amazing in what you do in having everybody. And just last Friday, actually, I was able to join in one of the sessions that we had, and youth vaping was what we actually focused on, which is great to see in the 10,000 voices in the report that you have done as well. One of the things that I'm keen to shout out is that you have a vote at 16 in Scotland, and they're consulting on that in England right now. So that means Scotland's leading the way, which is absolutely fantastic. We do need to make sure that we consult and listen and engage with young people. So I spend a lot of time going to different schools, academies. Castle Douglas are coming to Parliament soon, except they're coming using my iPhone because they can't come up in a bus. So I am taking my mobile phone on tour in the garden lobby and hopefully up to the First Minister's office so that the school can engage that way, and using digital ability to engage with young people. I also wrote a wee couple of notes here as well about supporting engagement and issues that the Scottish Government have listened to, and that is the under-22s bus pass. There's issues around free tuition for university that the Scottish Government has taken forward to enable young people to have further education. And of course, the Youth Guarantee is a plan that the Scottish Government have as well, which is that not everybody has to go to uni. You can do a different pathway, whether it's education, training, apprenticeships and other skills as well. My other wee note was around the question that said, if you do not intend to stay in Dumfries and Galloway, why would you leave? And it was travel, study or work. I think the version 2 or version 3, we need to maybe revise the question and say, what would bring you back? Because we do a lot of work about, you know, hearing the voices of young people who say they're going to leave. It's like, yes, but they might leave for education, but what can we do to entice you back? And a lot of the work that I do in Rural Committee and Health Committee is about listening to young people, because we've engaged in Environment Committee as well. In the last session, we heard the voices of young people, because climate change and the challenges of what we need to do to meet climate change is really, really important. So I, for one, am really keen to get out there and engage with young people, and happy to go and visit all the schools as well.
Thank you, Emma. And you've led very perfectly into the next question, which Ryan did such a good job of the first question. So, Joel, no pressure. No, I'm only joking. We had a chat over lunch, and these guys are brilliant. So, Joel, do you want to ask your next question, which follows on really nicely what Emma was talking about?
Thank you very much. Hi, I'm Joel. I'm the representative for Mid and Upper Nifsdale. And my question is, what extra support will decision makers provide to tackle the barriers facing young people in rural areas from accessing and sustaining higher and further education?
Well done, Joel. That is a brilliant question. I'm going to limit the speakers. I know you all want to speak. I can feel the excitement. But I'm going to limit you this time, or we won't be able to get the third question in. So everyone, can we do it in a maximum of 90 seconds? Right, Emma, you're going to start, and then we are going to go to Craig.
Good stuff. Right, thank you. So we hear lots about the real challenges is travel, buses and engagement. So we know that there's been a change in the bus companies from Stagecoach to Houston's and other operators, and I know they need to engage in making sure we have the best ability to get young people to where they need to be for further education. Online is another way. We know that in my visit to Dumfries and Galloway College recently, we talked about engagement with Stranraer campus using digital as well. I'm heading over to Stranraer in a couple of weeks actually to look at how we can do wee surgeries for me to hear what the students have to say as well. So travel is a big issue, and using our digital ability in order to engage with young people to help develop their or further education as well.
Yeah, thank you. Great points. Thank you, Emma. Craig.
Talk about equal opportunities. Geography should not be something that determines your future in the modern world. As Emma said, technology is hugely important, but I think it's also about making sure that we stop just thinking that Scotland is about cities, start thinking about rural areas. I mean, the colleges have had really significant budget cuts in recent years. The University of West Scotland had to potentially lose 75 staff this year, and often those who are in the outlying campuses. And I think the really, really important thing is that basically geography shouldn't determine your future. If you live in rural Scotland or you live in Dumfriesshire, you should be able to access all of the same opportunities, education particularly, because that is your future, than anybody else living elsewhere in Scotland. So I think it's about making sure we properly fund rural education colleges, making sure that wherever possible we get technology. One of the issues is learning or working from home. If you don't have proper access to broadband technologies or you've got no mobile signal, that's a huge barrier. That means people have to leave their communities. I think it's fantastic that people think globally about their education, whether they go to Glasgow or further afield. But ultimately, the really important thing is that if you want to continue to live and work in the town you grew up in or the village that you grew up in, that the opportunities come from the Central Belt, come from Edinburgh and Glasgow, Aberdeen, right here to the heart of our communities. And that's technology, but it's also about making sure we get the right funding for local services here in Dumfries and Galloway.
Thank you, Craig. Corey.
Yeah, so, I mean, the main kind of barriers really, you're talking infrastructure, we've already mentioned the internet, transport. Yeah, you've got, you know, free bus passes for young people, but if there's no buses, then the free bus pass isn't going to be any use to you, or they don't come at the times that you need to be there at a certain place. Accommodation as well, funding, finance, these are all barriers that determine whether people can get into education, and it's much more difficult if you're in a rural area. So I definitely agree, you know, opportunities should be for all, and we need to address the barriers for everybody that stops them getting into you know, further education or training, whatever it is. But the other thing about, it's okay to say that you'll use the internet or you can do online, but part of the education experience is being with other young people. And meeting new people and experiencing new things. So you don't want to put everything onto online, because, you know, you still want to be able to experience the world.
Yeah, thank you. Ross.
Thanks, yeah. So everywhere that I go in Dumfries and Galway, knocking on doors here, Kirkcudbright, Gatehouse, people of all ages, the number one issue is the buses, but especially for young people. So I said earlier, the Greens were really proud that we could deliver free bus travel for young people, but that's only any use if you can actually get the bus. And we saw recently with the debacle here with Stagecoach, that's a huge issue. That is in large part because 40 years ago, Margaret Thatcher sold the buses off to private companies. Buses should be ran in the public interest. At the moment, buses are ran primarily to make these companies money, and then providing you with a service comes second to that. So we want to bring buses back into public ownership, so we're actually running the routes that communities need, not the routes that, in the case of Stagecoach, just make Brian Souter as much money as possible. We also need, if we want young people to stay in an area like this for further and higher education, affordable housing. There's no point in building more housing if it's just all going to get bought by people who want a holiday home or people who are going to let it out on Airbnb. So another thing the Greens did is we've given councils the power to jack up the council tax on these second and holiday homes. In the first year of doing that, we doubled it in 1 year. We had 2,500 fewer holiday homes. So that's 2,500 homes that have gone back onto the market for people to get to actually live in. And ultimately, we need to fund, particularly colleges, universities as well, but colleges need a lot more money. And it's really easy for politicians to all talk about how everything needs more money. Colleges, universities, the health service, schools, whatever, all of it needs more money. But be a bit suspicious of politicians who keep telling you, yeah, more money for this, that, and that, without saying where that money would come from. I'm pretty open about the fact that there are a tiny number of people in this country who are obscenely wealthy and we don't tax them enough. The top 2%, the richest 2%, have more wealth than half the population of Scotland combined. So the top 2% have more money than 2.5 million people. If we want to fund our public services properly, we need to tax the people at the very top and we need to tax big corporations. If we do that, we will have the money to invest in things like colleges, universities, affordable housing, etc. Otherwise, it's dead easy for us to all talk about, yeah, we want more for this, that, and that, but it won't actually happen unless we're honest about where that money comes from.
Thank you so much, Ross. Pam or Alex, do either of you want to say anything? Pam?
Yes, please.
Go, yeah.
Thank you. So some of the issues have already been covered, but when I met Dumfries and Galloway College last week, incidentally, so I've been here all the way from Glasgow twice in a week, and I was talking to students there, but also staff, and transport was the number one issue that they brought up, and the ability to get a bus when you need it. And I think that's why it's really important that buses should be delivered, owned and controlled locally. It's essential because only then can we tie proper conditions to the contracts and make sure that they run for the public and not for profit. So that would be the first thing. Housing, similar to what others have said on the panel, if we don't have houses that are available, then people won't stay here or they won't come here. And so that's why it's really important for us to ramp up house building, and that's what we've seen. The UK Labour Government have started to make changes to planning permission and planning rules so that we can build more houses there. I'd like to see the same in Scotland as well, because we need significantly more houses, particularly when something like just under 15,000 young people are in temporary accommodation in Scotland. So that's another one. Connectivity and the importance of making sure we've got access to high quality broadband, but also 5G. And that's something that I know that, again, the Labour Government is committed to doing. But we also need to look at different models for delivery as well, so that people can access some courses online, but there's not much can take away the opportunity from doing this face-to-face. And you can't have face-to-face college learning if colleges are crumbling. We've had a 20% cut in college funding for over the last 10 years. That is causing a huge amount of problems in colleges, and we're seeing them having to cut staff and courses and student places. That can't continue. So we would far better align colleges with local and regional skills. And again, over the road, I met people who were studying for their construction apprenticeship, and what they were telling us was that they'd done their apprenticeship, they went out to go and do the job with the construction firm, and they hadn't learned some of these key skills that would have been essential, because the apprenticeship framework for construction wasn't properly updated in a timely way. So it didn't include, for example, learning how to build a ramp or steps. Now, as you can imagine, for me, I thought that was pretty crucial. But actually, it was a key point there, was that this is what we're not delivering for young people, what industry needs, and colleges are champing at the bit to try and change this, but they don't have the funding, nor do they have the route into being able to be much closer to industry and get apprenticeships much more fleet of foot. That's the changes that I think we need to make so that people can access college learning and university learning in local areas too.
Thanks, Pam. And Alex, last one.
Yeah. There's an island in the Hebrides called St Kilda. Until the early days of the 20th century, it was populated by a resilient and dynamic community, but it is uninhabited now. It's uninhabited because by the time the last residents were taken off and evacuated to other towns, they had to do so because all of the young people had moved away, and there was no one there who was physically able to carry the boats up the beach that they depended on to connect them to the mainland. The point of that story is that without young people, rural communities die. They just die. And you can see it starting in places like Dumfries. And it is connected to the transport infrastructure, the ability to get around, the connectivity. But that, in turn, is related to the opportunities that exist for young people. If there aren't good jobs for you, if there aren't things to entice you to stay and invest in the community which brought you up, then of course you're going to want to go to the bigger cities and the places where there are opportunities. But let me tell you, as we've heard, despite you having a national entitlement card for the bus, since the pandemic, we have seen 1 million fewer bus journeys every single year because of the erosion in those lifeline networks. That sees the hollowing out of towns. It's the reason why businesses don't choose to locate to places like Dumfries, because they don't have the connectivity to bring their customer base into the town. It's written large. As you drive into Dumfries town centre, you see derelict buildings everywhere as you come in, and that is because we need to attract investment. That's about connectivity, it's about housing, it's about making sure that you have the skills to connect in with those decent graduate jobs. All of that isn't happening, and it isn't happening because of a lack of industrial strategy from the government.
Oh, a lot of points there. I can feel lots of responses. Thank you, Alex. Very interesting. Right, absolutely brilliant question again from Joel. Great answers as well from our panel. So we've got our third and final question now from Louise. Second time up on the podium, Louise. Thank you very much. This is a super interesting question.
So the final question is, what harm reduction policies are needed to address the potential harms of artificial intelligence and to ensure the safety and well-being of young people online?
Okay, great question there. Thank you, Louise. About AI, I think this is something that we all feel very passionate about. Who would like to go first? Alex, are you nodding? Are you just smiling?
I've just spoken about it.
Smiling at the question?
I'm always smiling at you.
I just gave him, like, he was...
Look, this question is about AI in particular and online harm, but I think it's just the tip of the iceberg because we're not even getting the basics right. If you fell off your bike going home today and you broke your arm, you'd be in plaster by the end of the day. But if you went to your family or your teacher with self-harming behaviour or suicidal ideation, you join the longest queue in the National Health Service. There's no question about it. You have to wait months, if not years, for first-line assessment by child and adolescent mental health services. That is a national disgrace. We talk about parity of esteem between physical and mental health. It is not happening. And if you have suspected ADHD or other neurodiversity, that waiting list is even longer. It is sometimes measured out in several years, just at a time when this society is expecting you to sit life qualifying exams. But yeah, a lot of the harm is happening online. It is coming from online. The platforms that you inhabit are not safe places to be. And that's why the Liberal Democrats want to triple something called the digital services tax. That is the tax paid by the supergiant Facebooks and Metas and Snapchat and TikTok. They don't pay as much tax as they should be. And if we treble that tax, we would immediately earmark that money to put into child and adolescent mental health services. Because right now, the wreckage of childhoods and adolescents are found in the margins of those profits. We need to invest in absolutely in policies that make being online safer. But my goodness, we need to get the basics right first.
Thank you, Alex. Really good start to that. I've got lots of people putting their hands up, so I've got a list. We've got Pam, Ross, Corey, Craig and Emma. Right, Pam.
Thank you. So I think we need to fully get behind the Online Harms Act so that we can make sure that there are regulatory bodies with really, really clear codes of what needs to be done. We need to hold platforms to account. I think that they have to be far more responsible for the sorts of content that they allow to be driven through their platforms. But also we need to understand that AI has a lot of huge potential, huge potential, and that we should work with it, not against it, in my view. And we should do that from probably school all the way through into the workplace, so that we can understand how to use it. There is so much potential in what we could use AI for example, in the health service, so that we could detect certain cancers using AI. There's loads of it, but we're not really harnessing enough of that in school. Part of it is because we don't have enough teachers that can teach the subjects that are needed in order to be able to grow our skills in AI. And part of it is because I don't think we've quite yet got to grips with what I'm going to call ethical literacy, because there's been a report that I think was done by the RSE on this, actually, around the importance of understanding how do we use the online world safely, and how do we use AI safely. Now, years ago, when degrees in medicine were thought up, there was always an ethical part of that. So if you're going to become a doctor, you have to also understand the ethics, because you're getting access to be able to do a lot of good, but potentially harm as well, which is why ethics is a key part of that. I think AI has to have the similar component. We need to make sure that we understand the ethics of how we're using it. I also think it's really, really important to make sure that we build it not just through the curriculum, but empower young people to take that into college and into university as well, and use it so that they can really use its potential, but understand how to do it. So that's why I think we need to do it through schools. And I think it would be really important that we help young people to understand what being online safely looks like. I think we should criminalise behaviour such as sextortion, but also sending images against people's will. And I think that I would like to think that the Scottish Government will also get behind the current UK Government on that as well, so that we can make those things illegal as well and crack down on it too.
Thank you, Pam. Ross.
Thanks, yeah. I'd like to go back to the first question, actually, because I think in terms of how we protect you about this, PSE, personal social education, health and well-being, it's called something slightly different in most schools, should be the very first area of our curriculum that is co-designed by young people, because with the best will in the world, we're expecting teachers to teach you about something that they're not experiencing. The algorithm is showing you, whether it's on TikTok, Instagram, whatever, the algorithm is showing you something totally different to what it's showing your teacher, even if they're on the same platform as you. So PSE should be co-designed. I persuaded the government to agree that PSE is co-designed by young people, but they've been really, really slow at cascading that down so that that's actually what happens. There are some schools that are doing it, and the results are fantastic. I know a school where the whole 6th year PSE curriculum is designed around how to survive your 6th year holiday, because that's what the young people wanted to frame it around. It works really well. On AI specifically, though, the two big questions are who actually controls and owns this, and what data is it using? Big problem with AI is you've got a handful of basically comically evil tech bro billionaires like Elon Musk who are in control of it. And the data it's using, AI is only as good as the data that's being fed into it. You might have seen the news over the weekend, there was a knife attack on a train down south. If you ask Twitter's ARX, if you ask X AI system, it's called Grok, if you ask that, what did the attacker shout? It will say that the attacker shouted, Allah Akbar. They didn't. That's totally false. But Grok found that from a bunch of users on Twitter who wanted to plant lies and stir up hatred against Muslims. So they said that's what the attacker shouted. And now if you ask Twitter's AI, it will tell you that's what happened. And then that just becomes the received truth. There was an issue a couple of years ago where a school were using it to teach young people about, not Grok, another system, I think it was ChatGPT, to teach about Israel and Palestine. And said, do Israelis have a right to self-determination? And the AI said, yes, absolutely, all people have a right to self-determination. Then they asked it, do Palestinians have a right to self-determination? And the AI said, well, that's a very complicated question with very different competing answers. So we need to really think that, as Pam said, there's huge opportunities from AI. Things like in medical diagnosis, AI systems can spot things in an X-ray or an MRI that a human eye can't. So you could diagnose things sooner and you can save people's lives. That's fantastic. But if the AI system the NHS is using is owned by one of these tech bro billionaires and we're giving huge amounts of our personal health information to them, that's a massive issue. If it's owned by a company that's ultimately controlled by the Chinese state, which a lot of them are, that's another massive national security issue for us. So a lot of this keeps coming back to who actually owns the key bits of infrastructure in our society, and the fact that we've just gone through 40 years of privatisation where loads of public assets, whether it is our buses, our energy systems, telecoms, trains, all got sold off to private companies, and it was a disaster. We can't repeat that with AI. We can use AI to do so much good for the public, but it needs to be under some kind of public control or regulation. Otherwise, it's actually really profoundly dangerous.
Thank you. Ross, can I just back that up? I had a meeting the other day where I was looking up someone's bio. He's a new chief executive of an organisation that we work for, and he's about 45. And I looked up, you know, the summary you get on Google that summarises, and it said he was dead. And you know, when you're late, he's really not dead, because I've got a meeting with him in 5 minutes. So you've just got to be careful. Right, Corey.
Yeah, like everybody else has said, AI has got huge potential, and I think from my point of view as a dyslexic, it is really, really useful for condensing down information. So, you know, you could find, I could read a report, 4 or 5 pages, get to the end of it, and my brain is absolutely empty. Don't remember anything that I've read, nothing's been taken in. But I can ask AI to summarise that in 6 bullet points for me, and that makes life for me very much more easier. So that it definitely has some plus points, but equally though, it is a very dark side as well. And I think it's been touched on the ownership. Most of it's outside the UK, so that makes it very difficult to even police things, to get them to work with you. And, you know, I think hopefully there's a place for parents, caregivers, teachers, youth workers, anybody who's working with young people, to give young people the confidence that if they're not sure about something, or they get into a situation that they're not comfortable with, that they can come and ask for help, because nothing can be sorted. And just to always remember that you're maybe not even talking to a real person sometimes. So it's just about information, and, you know, giving you that resilience and information to make, so that you can make the right choices.
Thank you, Corey. Craig.
I think the question was about online harm. I think one of the interesting things is when it comes to AI and online, there's an economic benefit, there's economic harm, there's social benefit, and there's social harm. So take AI, for example. I mean, the economic harm that it could do is it could do all of our jobs. But actually, the interesting thing is that where a human works with AI, you actually get better results, which is why companies that have taken out people from the workforce and replaced them with AI are now having to re-recruit people back in again. But I think what it does mean for all of us, literally all of us, not just you politicians as well, is that in the course of our careers, we're going to have to learn and reskill multiple times in a way that people didn't in the past, because technology will keep developing very, very fast, but technology alone will not deal with a lot of the issues we need to address. So AI properly regulated, where it's used and managed by human beings, is going to be so much more powerful than if we just let tech run the whole thing. I think in relation to online harm, it's something I'm really, really concerned about. At the lowest end, it's just basically just the effects of us all using devices too much. In my household, my partner must say 7 or 8 times a day, put your phone away. We all use devices far, far too much. So I think there is an element of just the simple use. But when you then get into the really complex use, and sextortion was mentioned, which is really, really, really something that we should talk about. I know there's a lot of social embarrassment about it, but when you get, and it is largely young men, but there are young women as well who take their own lives because they've been trapped in this virtual mess, really. I think we've got to recognise that it's something that as politicians we need to talk about more. We need to talk about these issues because that is the underbelly of technology. But technology properly regulated, and it's our job, or collectively the politicians' job to regulate it, can be a force for good. But if we don't act against the harm, then I think in 10 or 15 years' time, we'll see it's doing real damage to society, to us economically and to us socially. So there's a bit of a wake-up call coming, and I think we need to get ahead of it.
Thank you, Craig. Emma, do you want to finish up?
So yeah, in my experience, you know, so before I was an MSP, I was a nurse, and we used a lot of technology in the operating theatre. And obviously now that's been AI driven as well. So Craig was talking about diagnosis of disease, and then, you know, you can help then get earlier diagnosis. You know, we know that AI's here. The genie's out the bottle, as they use that language. And sometimes my frustration is that the legislation and then the regulation is too slow to catch up. And that's because when it's presented, there's scrutiny, there's inquiries, then there's assessments, then there's decisions, then there's legislation. So that can take a long time. Meanwhile, that runaway train of sometimes really damaging AI in terms of fake news, Andrew Tate land out there, misogyny, all of that, it can be really, really damaging, and it's already down the line before we can even deal with it. But, you know, there is action that has been taken, you know, with age assurance on AI platforms. We know that probably most of you are not on Facebook, then there's others that will be emerging, other TikTok type platforms as well. And so I'm keen to make sure that we hold the platform holders to account, actually. And that's something that we need to make sure that, you know, they do what the legislation says in order to keep people safe. And, you know, and right now, Corey mentioned dyslexia. We are currently doing an inquiry in health committee right now to support young people with ADHD and who are autistic as well. We know that there are like artificial intelligence generated type ChatGPT, Copilot, things like that actually really do help support young people as well. And then I think that's all I need to say. And the final thing is, Dumfries isn't the only town with vacant buildings, Alex. It's happening across the whole of Scotland because of the nature of people shopping. So that's just a final comment. Thank you.
Doing Dumfries down.
Right, thank you, Emma and Alex. Right, brilliant. Can I just say, we've got more to do in a minute, but I just want us, before we pass over to Michael to chair the next bit, is just say a massive thank you, because I think Ryan, Joel and Louise did a really good job of both preparing the questions and presenting them.
Well done.
Michael.
That was brilliant. No, thank you. And thanks for answering all them questions. Now, I think what we've done is we've put some questions out to the schools and given you the opportunity to ask some. So I think we'll just kick off. We've got 2 questions lined up, and if we've got time, we'll do a third. So if you're sitting there with a question, then please don't be shy. So question 1 is Dumfries Academy. It's Greg. So can I ask Greg to stand up? He's given a microphone.
So my question to the panel is, if your party is elected next year, what would your first priority be for young people living in Scotland?
Emma, can I allow you to kick this one off, please?
Yeah, okay. So great question. Ahead of my first priority is making sure that young people are all registered to vote so that your voice is heard, because the future is your future. So first priorities would be making sure that we engage with young people. So we've heard in the first question that young people feel as if things are going wrong, that they're not listened to. So I would make sure that we enhance that voice and actually maybe send all the politicians out to the schools instead of bringing you into Parliament, which we just did last October. So I think making sure we hear what matters to young people, and we've heard that in terms of the 10,000 Voices study. Yeah, let's go to the young people and hear what they have to say.
Brilliant, thank you, Emma. Can I ask Pam, please, to...
Yeah, sure, thank you. Thank you for the question. So the first thing I think we need to do is deliver opportunities for young people, and that starts in education, it starts with schools. I think we need to have probably more support and more staff for young people, because we've seen an increase in additional support needs. We've not seen a subsequent similar increase in the numbers of staff around young people, but not just staff in schools. We also need to look at what other services and systems are around young people, because there used to be quite a bit of scaffolding, I would say, around young people to support them. That's not there now. You can't. It's much more difficult to get to see educational psychologists or speech and language therapists. CAMS wait times, we've already heard, are huge. But also, if you're not accessing a CAMS waiting time because it's considered that perhaps you need a neurodivergent pathway instead, where is that pathway? It doesn't exist in a lot of areas, certainly not in Glasgow, for any time soon. So all of those things need to be built around children and young people, and I think if we do that, if we can get support for young people and also for the staff who are working in schools as well, because they're having a bit of a hard time as well just now. So if we've got more people around young people, building back that scaffolding around them, then I think they'll be able to access education, which will then open opportunities for the future.
Brilliant, thank you, Pam. Ross, can I ask you to... Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I've already talked about my number 1 priority, which is about buses. I think we need to bring buses back into public ownership so that free bus travel for young people means free bus travel for every young person, i.e. so there are actually buses in your area, but also to go beyond under 22. So I want to expand free bus travel. Preferably public transport should be universally free. In Malta, in Luxembourg, everybody can travel on the bus for free, and it's been really good for their whole society and their whole economies. But we should go beyond buses as well, in communities that actually have a link to the rail network, expand expanding free train travel would be huge. It would give young people so many opportunities for work, for study, just for your social life to be able to get around. Beyond that, though, we need to pour money into mental health services, especially in-school mental health services. A couple of years ago, we managed to expand access to counsellors in schools. So there are now thousands more young people who can access a counsellor in school than they could maybe 10 years ago. That's great, but not everyone can access it. And what we found from a couple of years of doing it is there's pretty much a 2-to-1 gender split. So there's loads of young men who, for other reasons, are not accessing in-school mental health support. So I want to pour money into mental health, make sure every young person has access to support in their schools. But I think there's a particular bit of work that we need to do to make sure that boys and young men feel able to access those services as well.
Brilliant, thanks Ross. Just going back to what you were saying earlier, you told us to question where the money's coming from. So can you just, you're saying you would like to pour money into the buses and mental health. Where is that money coming from?
I'm going to try and be short here because I am my party's tax spokesperson. I could talk for hours about this, but you really won't want me to talk for hours about tax. I'll pick one particular example. So the Scottish Government has a tax break scheme for what's called small businesses. It's £250 million they spend every year on it. And some of the small businesses that get this 100% tax break include shooting estates owned by billionaires, owned by tax havens, I hate to say it, Craig, owned by Conservative MSPs. Those are not small businesses. I think if we fix our existing tax system, they're not Craig, I should say, just some of his colleagues, there are some taxes that I do want to increase, absolutely, but the first thing I would do is look at all the taxes we've got at the moment and close all the loopholes. So the government did a review of the small business bonus scheme, £250 million every year, and the independent review that they commissioned could find no evidence that it was having a positive impact on our economy. But we still spend £250 million on it. There are arms companies, multinational arms companies, whose car parking spaces get a small business tax break because they separated off the car park from the rest of the site. So if we close all these loopholes, we have immediately got tens of millions, hundreds of millions more to play with. But there's other taxes as well that we really need to start looking at. So for example, supermarkets. Supermarkets make a huge amount of money from selling cheap alcohol, but we don't tax them appropriately for it. If we brought in a public health levy on these supermarkets selling cheap booze, that would be about 60 to 80 million pounds more a year that we could bring in straight away. Wouldn't affect small businesses, would only affect these supermarkets that are posting record profits because of the sheer volume of cheap booze that they're selling. We could put that money into the health service to deal with the consequences of the harm they're doing. But I'll stop there because otherwise we'll
Thanks,
keep
Ross.
going forever.
That's great. Corey, would you like to answer this one?
Yeah, so as I said earlier on, my priorities would be for young people would be registering to vote because it's your voice, it's your future, and it's so important for you guys to be part of that process and to be heard. Secondly, as we've touched on in mental health, absolutely, but let's get in there at the beginning. Let's not do all the crisis stuff because it's too late by then. We need to put money in at the beginning to, well, you know, when people are just maybe starting out feeling a bit overwhelmed or whatever's going on in their life. But let's not get it to a crisis point. And in my opinion, where the money comes from, it's political choice. It's political choice at the end of the day. Political parties decide what their money is spent on. We can find money for wars at a drop of a hat. So let's prioritise what's more important, and definitely young people are. And finally, your 10,000 voice survey. Let's start with that. What's in there? What can we do? How can we implement what you guys have said you want?
Brilliant, thanks Corey. Just very quickly, Craig and Alex, for what we've got time for.
I think one of the first things we should do is to give you the confidence and the trust in us that your vote and your voice is of equal measure. And I'll just give you a very quick local and national example of where I don't think that is. Despite the fantastic work that the Youth Council does in Dumfriesshire, potentially next year the money is going to be taken away from youth beats, which would effectively mean that wouldn't take place. There's a discussion around whether or not you should pay for it. But I mean, people living in this part of the world can't afford to go up for the Transmit Festival. This is something local. It was run by the local community, by local young people. And I think that would be a real tragedy if that was taken away to save a few £1,000s. So there's a real example of where they're consulting locally but ignoring what they're hearing. Nationally, I think a big priority is about housing, and particularly rural housing, because one of the issues to get people to stay here, we need to have housing stock for young people that's affordable housing, so people can grow through the housing, get on the housing ladder and grow through it. And far too often I hear people say, I just can't get a house here locally, and that's when they start thinking about going either into towns or into cities. So ultimately, we need to act in a way that shows to each and every one of you that your vote and your voice is as important as everybody else's.
Brilliant, thank you. And Alex?
Well, this is all getting very real for you guys, because next year you'll cast, I guess, one of the first votes you've ever had the opportunity to do so. And actually, that means that you've only ever known SNP rule or SNP coalition rule with the Green Party. It's only ever been one party. And I think so much, while Scotland's got so much going for it right now, it feels like a lot of it is broken. It's just simply not working. So it's desperately time for change, but it needs to be change with fairness at its heart. And I think my party is looking like it's going to take a big step forward, particularly on that Peach second regional ballot paper. And our offer to you, as young voters, first-time voters, is several-fold. Firstly, additional support needs teachers in every single class. We need to massively invest in that to make sure that you have the quality of teaching that you need to be able to get on. Secondly, which has been touched on several times, but it was the Liberal Democrats that brought child and adolescent mental health to the fore, that we need to massively invest in clearing down CAMHS waiting times, but in particular neurodiversity, making sure that if you have suspected ADHD or autism, you do not have to wait until you are in your 20s to get even to the races for a diagnosis. We want to give you a national entitlement to youth work, both detached and sessional. That is been shown to reach the parts that other kinds of adult interaction with young people just doesn't reach. And we have seen the quiet erosion of that over the last 20 years. And particularly, and this one's personal for me because this is what I used to do when I was a professional youth worker, was working with young people in care, looked after young people. 13,000 young people remain looked after by the state on any given day in Scotland, yet they still have the worst national outcomes, whether that's likelihood to go to university or lack thereof, or more likelihood to be involved with criminal justice services. We are entirely failing that cohort of young people. We need to do much, much more to realise the promise that was offered to them by this failing government.
Brilliant, thanks. So we've got about 10 minutes left, so I'd like to invite Isla from Crichton Academy just to ask a question. Now, we'll please ask the politicians if we can quickly go through this one.
Should free school meals be extended to pupils in all year groups?
Brilliant, thank you. That's a pretty relevant one at the moment. So, Pam, I'd like to give this one to you.
Thank you. I'm a huge fan. Well, first of all, I think that free school meals should be delivered right up to primary 7, as was promised. So I think that needs to happen. And I'm a fan of breakfasts in schools, actually, for 2 reasons. One, I think it means that you'll start your day with a decent breakfast and some decent food in your stomach. But also for young people who find it difficult to get through the door of school in the morning, it gives you that kind of softer start. So I think for those reasons, that it's really, really important that we would deliver breakfast in all schools. For all year groups. But what I also think we should do, the thresholds for access for free school meals, particularly in secondary school, haven't been addressed for a long, long time, and people's incomes have changed over that period. And so we need to look at that again so that people who really need it can get access to free school meals. So we would be expanding access to free school meals at that point as well. But breakfast, I think, is something that's really, really important. The other point about that is it means that it's easier than, for example, in secondary school, if young people want to go out and about, maybe not availing themselves of the free school meals. If you've got breakfast, you're more likely to use that, I think, than the free school meal and stay in school at lunchtime. And so I think there's real benefits for doing that across Scotland.
Brilliant, thanks, Pam. Ross, very quickly, what do you think?
Yeah, it should be universal from early years, so preschool right up to S6. I've been to schools in Finland where that's the case, and the results are amazing. It creates more cohesion across the whole school community. Everybody's had something healthy and nutritious. You still have the opportunity in high school to leave if you want and get food outside, but most people don't because they're getting a decent meal for free in school, and if they went outside, they'd need to pay for it. So it used to be that universal free school meals was just primary 1 to 3. When the Greens came into possession of power, we expanded it to P4 and 5. We've got some more targeted expansion expansion. So Pam mentioned that the criteria for the targeted income-based free school meals is out of date. I agree. So in August, we started a trial of expanding it. So there's about 6,000 young people in Scotland who didn't get a free school meal in June and who are now getting it now as of August. And that's part of our trial to see if we change the criteria for who gets it, what will the impact of that be? And that's in high school. So yes, absolutely, the goal should be universal from 3 through 18. I'm proud of the work we've already done to give more young people those free meals, but we need to keep going further. It is really expensive though. Our best estimate, if we did it universally in high school, would be the upfront cost would be about £1 billion, because there are so many schools in Scotland who literally just don't have kitchens big enough to do that. So there's a huge amount of upfront work that we need to be done. That is still what we should be aiming for though. It is outrageous that we're in one of the richest countries in the history of the world, but 1 in 5 children here live in poverty. Thousands of kids will have woken up hungry this morning. We can solve that. We just need the political will to do it.
Brilliant, thanks Ross. Craig, where are we getting the money for that?
Well, I'm going to say, I'm going to sound like the party pooper here. I would say if it's affordable, because one of the things that politicians don't like telling you is if they spend money in one area, they generally have to spend less in another area. And there are schools in Scotland, including here in Dumfries, where there are not full-time teaching contracts available because the council can't afford to do it. They're basically just bringing in teachers on temporary contracts, which is stunting their career development and means there's this constant hamster wheel of teachers coming in and teachers leaving. And I think that is one of these things we've got to be really, really, really honest about, which is if we were to do this for every single pupil in Scotland, there would be a knock-on effect elsewhere, unless we can find the magic money tree that Ross seems to have found. So I think ultimately it's about being really, really honest with you. And if we were to promise to do it, I think this is the other thing about trust in politics where we started. If we promise to do it, we have to do it, because unfortunately, and this is a mildly party political point, too often politicians promise things, particularly things for free. So the SNP promised free bikes, they promised free computers, they promised free school meals. And in this Parliament alone, they've rolled back on all of those commitments. So I'd say if it's affordable, yes, but if it's not, we have to level with you and say, if we spend that money there, that will mean less available elsewhere. And ultimately, the worst thing we can do is promise this to you and then not deliver it.
Well, thanks, Craig. I think everyone appreciates honesty. Just before we move on, Ross, obviously, was a wee bit chirpy there.
Yeah, I mean, this whole magic money tree thing, it's funny. You find some politicians say difficult choices need to be made, and what they mean by that is we're going to cut the services that the poorest and the most vulnerable people rely on rather than make the richest pay their fair share. This is an unbelievably wealthy country. It's just that wealth is massively concentrated at the top. If we were brave enough to do something about it, we could fix that. So the council tax system, that's the main form of local tax, main thing that funds our local councils, hasn't been in date in my lifetime. The last time people paid the right rate of council tax was 1991. Because we've let that system get so out of date, the poorest people in our society are paying way more than they should, and the richest people are getting off with an absolute steal. There are dozens of ways we could fix the system, but they will involve upsetting rich and powerful people. So you just need politicians with the bravery to fix that.
Make one point in respect to that, Ross. Ross will always give you a very simple solution to a very complex problem. The problem about taxing the rich in the way that Ross would like to do, I'm not defending the rich, but what I am saying is that one thing you see is if you tax the rich beyond what they're willing to pay, they're also the most portable people. So they can fly off to Monaco, they can go to Jersey, they can go to any other country, Portugal. And the issue here is that if you tax people beyond what they think is acceptable, particularly the wealthy, they are the most portable. And actually, it's not just the wealthy that are being taxed in Scotland. Many people don't believe this when you put it to them, but teachers in Scotland are paying more tax than they would in the rest of the UK. Nurses are paying more tax. And I think that's the issue. We have to level with people. If we want all these public services and we want to make things free, it comes with a price tag attached.
Brilliant. Thank you. Emma.
So I think one of the recent pieces of information was that people are moving to Scotland because they see the benefits of what the Scottish Government policy has and is delivering. So, I'm the cross-party group convener of the Health Inequalities cross-party group, and we hear a lot about the challenges for, feeding kids at school. If we could afford it, I would agree we should make it available for everybody, primary schools, secondary schools. I recently heard the challenges of stigmatising a young person at the college who had a voucher to purchase lunch, and that young person didn't want to go and exchange the voucher for the food, so asked somebody else to do it for them. So we really need to look at these kind of challenges and break down the stigma of that. I think people with the broadest shoulders and the higher earners should be paying a little bit more tax. And we are seeing that, for me, Craig says nurses are paying more in tax. Nurses are the highest paid part of the NHS in Scotland compared to in England. And when they're talking about nurses, they mean band 7s and the higher rate band 6s. Band 2, 3, 4 and 5 nurses are paying less in Scotland in tax than the rest of the UK. So saying that Scotland's is the highest paying tax of the UK is actually not correct. It's just spin. So I think what we need to do is look at how we need to promote the best responsible budget spending, and that is what I believe John Swinney is leading us to do as we approach the budget. And obviously there are challenges when our health care is required almost 50% of the budget spending, and then all of that as well. So yeah, choices need to be made, and my choices would be whatever we can do to support better health and health care for people across Scotland, including our young people.
Brilliant, thanks Emma. Just for the audience, who are those with the broadest shoulders? Is that the 40% taxpayers, like, such as the teachers in the audience? Or, well, it's true that teachers and other young professionals and all that, they are going into this 40% tax bracket. Are those the ones with the broadest shoulders? Are these the ones footing the bill for?
So they're, it's, you know, it's proportional. It's not, you know, all of the wage is paid at higher level. My sister was a band 8 nurse consultant, and because of the number of people that she saw coming through her chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and asthma clinics, Phyllis saw, she said that she would gladly pay a higher level of tax if her tax was used to help support preventing people from being admitted to hospital and preventing young people from having exacerbations of their asthma. So when we present the choices to people, you know, and you show that this is what is you're getting for your tax, you know, free tuition, £10,000 a year for bursary for nurses, midwives and paramedics, so that we can help support the training of young people in Dumfries and Galloway, for instance. So it's, again, it's about choice, and if we can make sure that we help show people what we present as the choice, we hopefully will get people making the right decisions and choosing SNP next May.
Brilliant, thanks Emma. Just very quickly before I get told off for running over time, Alex?
Just very quickly, okay, this has been amazing. The quality of the questions has been excellent, the highlight of my week. The second highlight of my week will be when I help out a charity in my constituency which works in a high school in a deprived area in my community, and the charity is called Magic Breakfast. It exists to give free breakfasts to deprived young people from deprived backgrounds. This isn't about food as much as it is about educational attainment. We know that if you are hungry, your ability to learn to process data and information is far, far more inhibited. And it speaks, I think, to an inadequacy of the SNP government, the SNP Green government at times over the past 18 years. And that is that actually we've not made any progress in closing the attainment gap. What do I mean by that? That's the gap between those from the most affluent postcodes and those from the least affluent postcodes about their educational outcomes and the life outcomes that follow that. At the moment, the rate of change, the rate of progress towards closing that gap entirely, it would take this Scottish government 157 years to close in its propriety. So yes to free school meals, but far more beyond that. Pupil support assistance in classes, additional youth work entitlements, and my goodness, we need to invest in you guys because you are voting for the first time this year, but I hope and expect that many of you will be up on platforms like this in years to come.
Brilliant, Alex. Thank you very much. What now?
Last, Corey.
Corey.
No, I absolutely support free meals for all. And, you know, like what's been said, that a bit like prescriptions, right, you end up costing more money to administer who's entitled to it and who's not entitled to it, as opposed to just giving it to everybody across the board. And as has already been said, you can't, we've all been there, you can't concentrate if you're hungry. And I think, to be honest, with the money spent, the outcomes will be benefit. And it's a bit like I said earlier on about the early intervention. So we should be doing what we can to give young people the best possible start and possible opportunities at school.
Brilliant, Corey. Thank you very much.
Michael's looking at me, which means I've got to say something. It's just say it's been lovely co-chairing with you, Michael.
Thank you very much.
We're going to hand over to Sarah now, just to close up. But I'd just like to say a massive thank you to our politicians for making time, and a massive thank you to you guys who've been absolutely epic, especially those ones who got up and asked questions.
Thank you to everybody today. I'm going to name a few, but if you hadn't come here, it would be an empty room with very few questions and very few challenges. So thank you, each and every one, for coming here today. I should say, sorry, who I am. I'm Sarah Skerritt, and I'm the Chief Exec of the Royal Society of Edinburgh. So we're delighted to have worked with partners here today and in the months leading up to this to make this happen. So firstly, I'd like to echo Alicia's thanks to the politicians on my right, Emma, Pam, Craig, Alex, Ross and Corrie. And I think a wee round of applause to them again for coming here today. That'd be good. And there were definitely points of consensus as well as you'd expect, points of differences. But it's great that this has been a cross-party debate very genuinely. So I'd also like to thank the young presenters, Louise Church, Skye Allen, Riley True, Ryan McLaughlin, Joel Goldsworthy. So a round of applause for them, please. Yes. And Zoe and Laura have already been name-checked from YouthWorks, Dumfries and Galloway. They were very modest beforehand, saying, oh, we just turned up, we didn't do anything. But we know that's not true. So a big round of applause, please, for Zoe and Laura. I'd also like to thank our partners. We could not have done this on our own, absolutely not. So these thanks are from the heart to Young Scot, the Scottish Youth Parliament, the Holyrood Trust, Easterbrook Hall and South of Scotland Enterprise. Thank you very much. I'd also like to thank our co-chairs who've steered us through brilliantly. If you haven't been to many of these where they overrun and you're still here at 5 o'clock thinking, when is this going to end? I think we can't take for granted how brilliant our two chairs, Alicia and Michael, were in keeping our politicians to time and to topic. So thank you to our co-chairs. Thank you. And just before I finish, my last thanks to my colleagues and our fellows, our members at the Royal Society of Edinburgh, Stephen Breslin, who opened as our young persons convener, and my wonderful team, Jess, Fraser and Ishita, as well as Kate, who said thank them, but not me, so as in Kate. So thank you to all of those from the RSE. Thank you. So finally, I've been asked to mention, I don't know if it's on screen yet, but there will be a QR code for feedback. So if you do have your phones with you and want to give some feedback, particularly from those of you who've come from schools, that would be great. If you don't have a phone that can read the QR code, you will receive an email asking for feedback. This is part of a series of events, pre-election, where we'll be quizzing our parliamentarians again in different venues, different parts of the country, and some of that will be live streamed. So please do look on the socials, on Insta, on Facebook and LinkedIn and others to find out more about what's coming down the track. Obviously, this is the best and most important one, but there will be in other parts of the country as well. So finally, I just want to wish you all safe home. I know some of you have to go straight away, so travel safe while it's still daylight, safe home, and thank you all again, every single one of you, for making the time to be here today and contributing. Thank you.